And I never could understand how the German doctors could do what they did until I looked at what I had been doing. And I realized that the reason they could kill their victims and, without any impunity was the same reason I could kill my victims. And that was we didn't see them as human beings.
Carrie and I are on tour in Fleming Island, the Jacksonville area. And we're going to have an interview here in what I call the storybus with Dr. Kathi Aultman. I'm excited for today. And Dr. Kathi Aultman has been an board-certified OBGYN for 33 years. She has also performed hundreds of first and second trimester abortions. She also served as the medical director for Planned Parenthood for Northeast Florida. Now, she's a sought-after speaker and has testified before Congress. She was the keynote speaker at the Rose Dinner for the March of Life in D.C. And this is the story of her journey from being pro-choice to pro-life. Thank you, Dr. Aultman, for being here with us today. And I am truly fascinated by your story. And we would really like to hear your journey from being pro-abortion to what the Lord has done in your heart and bringing you to being an advocate for life. Would you tell us, just start from the beginning and tell us your story?
Okay. Well, the very beginning is I was a preacher's kid. My dad was a Methodist minister. And when I was little, I remember a lady coming and talking about the lepers in India, and she had us crocheting bandages, and I wanted to be a missionary. Mm-hmm. But as I grew up, things happened in the church. When when you're minister's kid, you see all the behind stuff, and I knew about God, but I didn't really know God. I wanted to, but I couldn't seem to really find him. Mm-hmm. I thought when I got confirmed that I would, everything would miraculously be imparted to me, but that didn't happen, and it was just sort of about the rules of the church. And by the time I was ready to go off to college, I really thought that religion was just the opiate of the people, that God wasn't real, and I considered myself an atheist. After I got to college, unfortunately, they had a program to teach us about sex. They thought we needed to know about sex when we got there.
Which college did you go to?
Oh, I went to Drew University.
Okay.
And part of the orientation program was a talk about sex. Okay. And a married woman gave it, and she was telling us about how wonderful sex was. Now, you have to remember this was during the sexual revolution. This is in the 60s. Okay. And I had always thought that, you should wait until you're married before you have sex. Mm-hmm. But after that talk, I thought, well, maybe that's not true. Maybe you don't have to wait. And I just had a series of relationships where, and I was sexually active. Oh. So eventually I graduated from college, from Drew, and I remember I was walking through the park one day and I saw this little brochure, and it was about Jesus, and I picked it up and I thought, wow, that'd be wonderful, but it's not true. It was all about having a personal relationship with Jesus, which I hadn't heard about that before, even being a preacher's kid, right? So after college, that year when I was teaching, spring break, went down to Florida. Mm-hmm. Met the man that I eventually married. As a matter of fact, the second day I met him, and then he invited me to go to the beach the next day, and that day he told me he was going to marry me. should have been a warning. But he then talked me into coming down to stay in Florida this summer before I was to enter medical school. So when I finished my job, I went down there, and we were living apart, but again, we ended up having intercourse even though I didn't want to. We did, and I got pregnant.
Okay.
And I think that changed the whole trajectory of my life, because I was afraid that if I had the baby, I wouldn't be able to become a doctor. I was afraid that if we had to get married, that our marriage would end up in a divorce. And I was afraid of what people would think of me. So I did have the abortion. What was sad was that all those reasons ended up not being real reasons. When I got to medical school, I met several women who had their children first and then went to medical school and were doing fine. Our marriage ended in a divorce anyway, and I realized that the people that I really cared about me would have been supportive. So none of those reasons were valid. So by the time I went to medical school, by the time I started my residency program, so you have 4 years of medical school, then 4 years of whatever residency you're going to do, and I chose OBGYN. And by the time I started, I truly believed that abortion was a woman's right, that no woman should have to have a baby that she didn't want, that we shouldn't bring unwanted children into the world where they might get neglected or abused.
Do you think that you having an abortion had an effect on the way you wanted to staunchly?
Right. Okay. I'm sure that affected my thinking. Okay. And
a justification for it. Okay.
Probably, it's probably underneath subconscious.
It. Yeah, you probably didn't
subconscious.
Realize,
I thought the best way to help women was to help them have an abortion.
Because in your case, you felt, at least at that point, relieved.
Yeah.
Because the long-term consequences hadn't really hit yet, and so you thought you might as well help other women in the same spot.
Right.
Okay.
And now, if I had a woman who wanted an abortion, I was happy to do that for her. If I had a woman who had a baby and she was miscarrying, well, then I would mourn with her. So, I wasn't just completely cold-hearted.
Right.
But we had the option of opting out of doing abortions. I chose to do them.
In training?
In training. So
you trained for 2 different kinds of abortions, the first trimester and the second trimester.
Right.
Will you tell us what those are like? What's the difference?
So the program trained us in the first trimester D&C with suction abortions, and then I went outside the program on my own to learn how to do the D&E or dismemberment abortions. So the D&C with suction, you insert a little plastic tube into the uterus, and it suctions out everything, the baby, the placenta, the decidual tissue. And that you can do that up to 13, 14, maybe 15 weeks.
Okay.
After that, the baby's tissues are firm and they can't easily be pulled into the suction. And that's when they came up with the D&E, or dilation and evacuation, where you actually have to, either 1 day or 2 days ahead of time, you have to dilate the cervix, because the cervix, which is the opening of the womb, has to be more dilated or opened. So we put laminaria in, which is a type of seaweed that expands. Oh. And then we use a larger tube. It's inserted, and you suction out all the fluid. which brings the baby down closer to the cervix.
Mm-hmm.
And then you reach in with this grasping forceps that is pretty brutal, so that you just reach up and grab whatever you can and pull out an arm or a leg. And as you're putting traction, the cervix is small enough that the whole baby can't fit through, and so as you pull, you're able to pull off the arms and legs. And then you go in and try to crush the head next, and then crush the body, and then get the placenta. And then you have to go back and check to make sure you put the suction in again, suction out everything. But then you have to count all the body parts, which you have to do with first trimester also.
All of them. You have to count the body parts.
You have to count the body parts.
Now, did that affect you at all when you put those little body parts together, the little fingers and toes and arms and legs?
I had the same reaction as Abby Johnson. I was fascinated with how perfect they were and the little fingers and toes.
Wow.
I was so interested in them. We would send things down for pathology, so I would send the liver and I'd send the intestines, or I'd send different parts, and because we had to look at the slides as part of the program. And I was just fascinated the way how the fetal cells looked and how things were arranged. And so I was never disgusted or horrified. Why? I don't know. I think part of it is that in medicine you're taught to compartmentalize, because you do things that hurt people, and so you got to put things in different places.
So you just put it on the shelf that this is
a little,
that it didn't. Because you're an atheist at this point, right? So you're not thinking God made this. You're it's just a blob of. They said it's a blob of cells, although you can tell by looking at it, it's not really a blob of cells.
Right. No, I never thought it was a blob of cells, but
this is a scientific thing you're putting together as like, okay.
I didn't see those little babies as any different than the chick embryos that we dissected in college, and so. It was really, I think I looked at it the same way as all those creatures that we dissected. And I didn't really see it as any different. The only time that I had qualms about doing abortions was when I realized in my neonatal intensive care unit rotation that we were trying to save babies the same age as some of the babies we were killing.
Wow.
But, again, I compartmentalized. I put it in the back of my brain, and I didn't think about it again.
And did you say these babies are wanted and those babies are not wanted? So
exactly, and that was my criteria, was whether they were wanted or not. I liked doing abortions, and I thought I was helping women, so I got a job at an abortion clinic in Gainesville, mostly doing abortions on college kids, and I was so gung-ho that even when I continued, even when I was pregnant. Now that horrifies me now, and I worry about the spiritual repercussions to my child. I tried very hard to make this actually very painful procedure as painless as possible for my patients, never thinking what that baby was experiencing. Now we know that certainly, babies even at 12 weeks can feel pain. All the little sensory neurons are present in their face like at 8 weeks.
I've heard that the pain sensories are there at 8 weeks.
Yeah. So we don't know in what way they experience it or whatever, but when you go in to do the procedure, if you're looking at it under ultrasound, no, I didn't experience this, but I know Abby did. The baby tries to scoot away. They try to get away. And one of the most horrific stories I heard was from a radiologist who was present during a reduction procedure where if a woman has triplets or even twins, they, in order to decrease the risk for the woman, they go in and they will get rid of one or two of the babies.
Really?
And so this woman had triplets, and the OBGYN was doing the procedure. And every time he tried to stab this one little baby in the chest, the baby would scoot away. And after the baby scooted away several times, of course, the mother was getting frantic. And they had to turn the thing away so she couldn't see.
And she's watching this.
She was watching.
Oh.
And then the radiologist had to leave the room. But he said after he tried several times with that baby, then he tried another baby and was successful.
Oh, wow.
But to me, that was a horrendous story, and I didn't hear it at the time. Maybe I should have. It might have changed my opinion.
I think there were some women that had abortions, but they all had different reactions. Can you tell us about that?
So after I had my baby, something must have changed. Because I didn't realize it, but something had changed because the very first time I went back to the clinic to do abortions, I ran into 3 patients, and it was after those 3 patients that I could no longer do abortions. First girl, I had done 4 abortions on her, and I hadn't been doing abortions that long. And I went to the clinic manager and I said, I don't want to do this. She's using it as birth control. And I was told, it's her right. You don't have any say, so you have to do it. And I looked at her and I said, yeah, but I'm the one doing the killing. So something had changed.
You used the words killing.
I did.
The word killing.
I did. So something had changed. I'd made that baby-fetus connection somehow. So then a few patients later, I had a woman come in who came in with her girlfriend. And after the procedure, the girlfriend said, do you want to see the tissue? And she said, no, I just want to kill it. And I thought, what did this baby do to you? It wasn't the baby's fault.
And you used the word baby in your mind.
In my mind.
What did this baby ever do to you?
Again, so something had changed.
Something had changed.
And then the third patient was a woman who had 4 children at home. And she and her husband decided they just couldn't afford another baby. She cried the entire time she was there. And when I left that day, I realized that I could no longer kill babies just because they weren't wanted. But unfortunately, I still believed in abortion. I still referred for abortion. But some things happened that slowly changed my mind, put little chinks in the armor. I ended up becoming a Christian. My girlfriend and I at this point were in very bad marriages, and we decided we wanted to just hear the good things we'd heard growing up in church. So we went back to church, and that's when we felt very comfortable, and we kept going. And one day the pastor was talking about I guess it was Isaiah. He said it was Abraham, but it was Isaiah. That
the pastor had.
I think so, because for years I was saying Abraham, and then I realized it's not Abraham, that's Isaiah. And he said that he heard a small, still voice. And I thought, I've been waiting for a big miracle, clanging cymbals, something that would really, show me that God was real. And I thought, I have that small, still voice.
Small voice. I know that story. Okay.
And so the next day, or 2 days later, I went to his office and I said, you've got to help me. I just feel like I'm in a whirlwind and I don't know which way is up. And when I left there, he gave me 2 books. So he gave me Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell, because I did not believe there was an historical Jesus who walked the earth. And in reading that, I thought, okay, yep, he really was. He also gave me C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. And then I agreed with him that either Jesus was who he said he was, or he was the biggest liar and lunatic. And that's when I gave my life to Christ. And
you surrendered.
Then I surrendered, yeah. So the pastor had actually asked us to, or had told us, if you will go home and write in your Bible, I commit my life to God today, you'll see a difference in your life within a year. He didn't even ask us to accept Jesus or anything. And but then after reading those 2 books, I did.
Okay.
I gave my heart to Jesus. Still believed in abortion.
Because you still bought into the political version of all the things you'd heard, and also you're pro-women, you're one to help women, you think that's okay.
Yeah, that feminist rhetoric, I bought it hook, line, and sinker.
So what started changing your mind about that?
Well, in my practice, I was seeing these young women who had unplanned pregnancies, who were doing really, really well. And then I was seeing other women.
And they'd kept their babies.
I'm sorry, unplanned pregnancies. And they kept their babies. And they were doing really, really well. And then I was seeing other women who were having abortions and suffering the consequences, both physical and emotional, from having had the abortion. So,
on that note, I just looked up it's a study by Cambridge University. That I think it's been a little while now, but they actually found that there's quite an increased risk of emotional, mental problems, psychological problems with women that have abortions. It's not right away, but it's an increased risk in anxiety, depression, alcohol abuse, suicide. And so we don't hear about that. No. They don't talk about that. So when you're seeing this, as the time goes on, they're not doing as well.
Right.
Okay.
One of my patients came in and she had an abortion really early. As soon as she knew she was pregnant, her knee-jerk reaction was to have an abortion. And she was having trouble with bleeding, and she was saying how she was seeing a psychiatrist because the knowledge that she killed her child was far more difficult to deal with than the fact that she was pregnant. And she was, had such remorse for having killed her child.
They talk about how, well, this will solve everything. You'll be relieved. You'll be fine. And they don't address the fact that this is something that can't be undone. And for the rest of your life, you're going to realize that this is a life that could have been lived. And the birthdays go by, and you think of what would they be doing now when they're 16, when they're 18. And it's just regrettable that the lies that are told that so many women buy into. And
we use our society uses abortion as the easy out. It's a lot cheaper to pay for an abortion than it is for maternity care. And we have not done the things that we need to do to provide daycare and things that young families need so they don't feel they have to abort. Although
I do think that the pregnancy centers have done an amazing job of coming alongside and helping in all those different ways, financially and with help and supplies and prayer and counseling. So there are resources out there if someone wants to keep their baby.
Absolutely. Yeah. And pregnancy centers have just been a godsend. And the Charlotte Lozier Institute compiled a big study on all the pregnancy centers and all the services that are provided, and it was in the millions. I started teaching a kids' Bible club during the Wednesday night services, and these were the most precious kids from like kindergarten to I think second grade. Just precious. And one of them had Down syndrome, and another one or two, their moms were single parents. And I thought, if their mothers had made a different decision, these precious kids wouldn't be here.
Wouldn't be there.
So that was another little chink in the armor.
Okay.
But the thing that finally changed my mind was I had gotten involved in a Christian singles group. And even though they knew what my position was on abortion, they still embraced me and loved me. And one day, after we gotten to know each other well enough, this one young man said to me, Kathy, I know you feel strongly about abortion, but would you read this article? Mm-hmm. And I said, sure. So I read the article. Well, I have to preface this by saying my father was with an observation unit, or went in as an observer when the first concentration camp was liberated during World War II. Wow. So I grew up with all those pictures and stories, and I never could understand how the German doctors could do what they did until I looked at what I had been doing. And I realized that the reason they could kill their victims and, without any impunity was the same reason I could kill my victims, and that was we didn't see them as human beings.
So that's what that article addressed, was that there's the Holocaust and abortion, and it's basically dehumanizing.
Right. They compared abortion to the Holocaust. And that's what I realized, was that that was why I could do what I did, because I didn't see them as human beings. That's when I for the first time saw myself as a mass murderer. Ted Bundy was in the news, and he was a serial killer, for those that are too young to remember. But I thought, gosh, I've killed a lot more people than Ted Bundy, and they're executing him.
That must have been devastating.
It was.
For you to realize.
Absolutely devastating. Wow. Thankfully, my pastor's wife was a good friend of mine, and she gave me Susan Stafford Rue's book, Will I Cry Tomorrow, which is a book about post-abortion syndrome healing. And I read that, and I said, okay, Lord, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. The last thing I wanted to be involved with was abortion, though.
Right.
But I got an email that week asking for volunteers to go to Washington to testify on the partial birth abortion, which is, with babies, they're even too far along for the D&E procedure. Babies that are in their late second, third trimester, they were delivering them all except the head, puncturing the skull, removing the brain, and delivering the baby.
Oh, it's gruesome.
Even as an abortionist, I didn't understand why they weren't arrested for murder. Yeah. To me, that was murder. Yeah. Even before I'd had my revelation. So I said, I'll go. And it ended up they had enough people for that, but that opened the floodgates, and I found myself testifying throughout the country, either in front of legislatures or in court, defending the bans that passed, and then eventually before Congress. So that night, I went to bed, and God woke me up at about 4 a.m, and I had a Bible on my nightstand, and I just felt like I should open it. So I opened it up, and it fell open to Proverbs 24, and my eyes fell on verses 10 through 12. This was an NIV version. If you falter in times of trouble, how small is your strength? Rescue those being led away to death. Hold back those staggering toward slaughter. If you say, but we knew nothing about this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who guards your life know it? Will he not repay each person according to what he has done?
Wow.
So the next night,
That's powerful.
I went to bed, and same thing happened. He woke me up at 4 a.m. And this time I had a New King James Version there, and and this is the only version that says it exactly this way. I opened it to Proverbs 31, 8-9. Open your mouth for the speechless and the cause of all who are appointed to die. And I have to tell you that it bothered me more once I saw the light. It bothered me more that I killed my own child than killing other people's children. it was harder to
well, you're
deal
connected
with.
to that child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
but isn't it amazing how God can redeem everything? Exactly. And He does redeem everything if we let Him just
He does
do what He does.
In COVID, when we couldn't travel anymore, He gave me the opportunity to write the paper on mifepristone with some of my other colleagues. And we looked at all the side effects. We tabulated all of the severe side effects that were reported to the FDA. We compiled them all.
Wow!
In the study, and
that's the abortion pill that is so prevalent now.
Yeah,
and it's not safer, as safe than
that's safer than Tylenol,
supposedly. Right?
Supposedly, but it's not. And now the studies are coming out. Yeah. That there's
it's actually quite dangerous, isn't it?
It's more dangerous than a surgical abortion. We already knew that.
Wow.
But we now know that at least 10% of women will have a serious complication, and they were telling women that it was less than 0.1%, and safer than Tylenol. So
well, before we go on, since you have your computer here, would you give our viewers some of the resources that they could use to look up some of these facts, or if they want to look into more of the side effects or what's going on, what of the Lozier Institute or anything else can you recommend to us? And we'll put them in the notes too.
Yeah. So the Charlotte Lozier website, charlottelozier.org, is a wonderful website for getting information. Live Action is also great. Get on their email list, because they'll send you something every day, I guess it is. They'll give you stories of different things that are happening. They're a wonderful organization. They have videos of each of the abortion procedures. They have, they're animated versions of each of the abortion procedures.
Okay.
And then they have two wonderful animations. One is Olivia, and it's an animation, but a lifelike animation of Olivia growing from from the single cell after the egg and sperm meet to birth. And then the other is Oliver. The other delightful resource is Endowment for Human Development. It's edu.org. They have little video clips of babies inside the womb. So they've done something called amnioscopy, where they put a little scope in, and you can look through the clear amniotic membrane, and you can see this little baby floating around in there.
Wow.
And so they go all the way up to where the baby is kind of too far away to see, and then they'll switch to the 4D ultrasounds, which are, it's a 3D ultrasound but with movement, so
you can actually see what's happening.
So you can actually see what the babies are doing. They're jumping around, making faces. It's interesting, if the mom eats something bitter, they'll go like that. If the mom eats something sweet, they smile.
Oh, that's amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Well, thank you for those resources. The other thing I would like to ask you, since you have been in their shoes, if there are any women that happen to be watching or looking at this video that are considering having an abortion, or even men that are feeling like they need to convince a woman to have an abortion, what would you say to them?
I would say just what you said earlier, that this is something that will affect them for a lifetime. There are resources if they think they just can't do it, they can't handle it. There are resources. Go to a pregnancy resource center. They will do a free ultrasound for you, and you can see your baby in there. You can see what you're about to do. You can see that little baby moving around in there. I think it's something like 80% of people, once they see, they don't abort. And
they are such a wonderful resource to help.
Yes, they do.
In
They
all
they
the
help
different ways. Right?
They help financially, emotionally. It's a lie that if you have a baby and you're young, that your life is going to be ruined. For one thing, nobody has to keep a baby that they don't want. Adoption nowadays is amazing. They have these open adoptions where you can have videos of different families that want your baby, and you can choose which family gets the baby. You can choose if you want to be a part of that child's life or not. So it's not that picture of the nurse grabbing the baby away, and you never see the baby again, and you don't know what happened to the baby.
Desperate picture that they have.
Right. And
also, if you're worried about a disability or Down syndrome, there's a long waiting list of families that want to adopt children with Down syndrome or disabilities.
That's true.
They want them. Yes. So that's not a reason to abort either, because that's a living, breathing human. It will be breathing. It will want a life as well that God has ordained. And I think that they need to realize that just because there might be a disability, that's not a reason to abort either.
When my daughter was pregnant, both her children, they were told her son had a brain cyst and had a defect in his heart. Turned out none of it was real. But heaven forbid they would have had an abortion because of it. But so many women now are told, oh, you have an abnormality, this baby's going to die, and, you need to have an abortion because they're going to suffer and all of this. Well, all of that is a lie. Emotionally, and it would be too hard on you to carry this baby to term knowing the baby's going to die. No, there's something called perinatal hospice, and they can come alongside and counsel you and give you support so that you can get through the pregnancy, and then whatever's going to happen afterwards. There are several women who've been told we're going to have an abnormal baby, and it turned out the baby was completely normal.
I've heard that so many times.
Yeah, so that's a problem. But even if the baby is going to have a problem, psychologically, it's far better to nurture that baby in the womb, even if the baby's going to die before delivery or die immediately after. You have done everything you can to give that baby whatever life that baby can have. And they deserve the chance to at least breathe the air, and feel the sun on their skin, and to just exist, even if it's for a short time. And it's amazing how God gives people what they need to be able to take care of those babies. And if they can't, again, adoption is a possibility. I had a woman stop me in the restroom. They usually catch me in the bathroom. And this lady caught me, and she said she had cared for a baby that was disabled until, for about 3 months, until the baby died. They knew the baby was going to die. The mother had 3 other children, and she just couldn't take care of the baby. So this woman volunteered to care for this little baby, and she said, I was blessed to have that time with that baby, and the mother was blessed because she didn't have to kill her child.
And then you've left it in God's hands.
And
I believe God will bless. He will help take care of.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time today and all of your sharing your heart and sharing your story with us. And we will be praying for you as you continue to speak out for the unborn. Thank you so much for joining us today. The music that you're hearing is from our song Hold Me. It's written from the perspective of an unborn baby. You can watch the lyric video on YouTube or listen to it on Spotify or your favorite streaming platform. Please don't forget, if you haven't already, to subscribe and to share this. And it's a small way that you can help out this podcast.